If you're watching this video, you're one of 3 people. Person A just bought a Mac, has no idea how to use it. Person B needs a new computer and doesn't know whether they should go Mac or not. And person C is my friend, who I'm trying to convince to get a Mac, but he doesn't want to because he's never used one before, but it's the best budget value laptop. Or you're just watching my content because, sometimes I can provide entertainment too. Whatever person you are, I'm confident that you'll be confident on your new Mac. And if you're not, you can send your watch time back within 30 days for a full refund. This is free. It's free. Let's start with the lesson structure. This video is split up into 3 sections. Section 1, or Back to Basics, will teach you how to navigate macOS and some of the various keyboard shortcuts you can use, and their equivalents on Windows. If you just want to quickly learn macOS without any other, additional improvements, you can safely stop the video there, but I wouldn't suggest it. Section 2, or Mac But Better, will teach you how to use Windows programs on macOS, some helpful apps to use to improve your experience, and the best ways to game on Mac. And then at the end, I'll quickly show you how I have my Mac set up. At the end of each section, I'll, go through a little recap. If you get a stop or, pause for the day, I would stop at the start of the recap so you can come back and then I'm like, here's what you just learned, and you're like, oh yeah, true. This tutorial assumes the following. You know your way around Windows. A lot of this tutorial is just, this is how you do something in Windows, and this is how you do it in macOS, or this is a way to do it in macOS. You have very little experience with Mac. While you might be able to get some tips out of this video as a seasoned Mac user, you'd probably be able to get those same tips in a much shorter amount of time by just going on YouTube and searching 20 best tips and tricks for macOS that I bet you didn't know. You have a Mac with macOS Monterey or Ventura. I wrote this with Monterey in mind. I recently updated to Ventura and I didn't screen record anything. So a lot of these screen recordings are going to be in Ventura. But you might also be able to use these tips in versions that are slightly earlier, like Big Sur. But in newer versions, there might be some major changes that just make this guide outdated. I will probably update a pinned comment for the next few major releases, but I can't do that forever. And you're using the keyboard that came with your Mac, whether that be the one built into the MacBook or the Magic Keyboard that comes with the iMac. Some of the keyboard shortcuts I'm talking about are function row keys, which just won't work on any other keyboard. And I also make references to the key layout, which might be different across the board. All of the sections in this video will have timestamps in the video progress bar and a bit further down in the description. Now that you know how we'll be doing things, it's time to grab a coffee, sit down, and learn macOS. The length of this video might be a bit daunting, but you got this. I believe in you. When you land on the macOS desktop for the first time after setting it up, it's going to look a lot different to what you're used to. At the bottom of the screen, you'll find the dock, and at the top, you'll find the menu bar. In Windows, you're probably used to each individual window having its own set of menus, things like File, Edit, stuff like that. In macOS, all of these menus have a central location at the top left of your screen in the menu bar. Apart from that location, they act basically the same way they do on Windows. If you look at the right of the menu bar, you'll have a section similar to the bottom right of the taskbar on Windows. Here, you'll find your control center, similar to the quick actions menu on Windows 11, along with other options like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and battery, and your date and time. Any apps that run in the background, like Google Drive, will probably also have a menu bar item that will appear there. If you enabled it during setup, you'll also find Siri. Now let's go to the dock. By default, you'll see any programs pinned to the dock, any apps you've used recently but haven't pinned, any minimized applications, and any files and folders you've decided to add. The downloads one is there by default. Oh, and you'll find the bin. Out of the box, you'll have a lot of Apple software pinned to the dock. If you're anything like me, you'll never use Apple Podcasts in your life, or basically anything else that's there. To remove an icon from the dock, just click and drag it out of the dock, wait until it becomes slightly transparent and has the text remove over it, and then let go. There are a few important apps that you do want to leave in the dock though, those being Finder, which I found out after writing you actually just can't remove it, and Launchpad. Finder is the equivalent to the File Explorer on Windows. This is what you'll use to browse your internal boot drive and any other external drives you have plugged in. If you want to add a folder to the dock, you can just grab it from Finder and drag it next to, in that section where your files and folders are. I think you can do files as well. The Launchpad is the easiest way to just look through all of your apps. It shows them all in a nice grid. It's essentially the equivalent of clicking See All in the Windows Start menu, but it looks a bit nicer. If you want to add an app to the dock, you just drag it from the Launchpad into the dock where you want to put it. Whenever you need to search for a file or a folder or an app on your Mac, you'll be using Spotlight Search. Spotlight is the equivalent of Windows Search on Mac. Unlike Windows Search, you'll very rarely find yourself hating Spotlight because most of the time it actually works, and it won't even force you into Microsoft Edge and Bing, unlike Windows Search. You can click the search icon in the menu bar or press F4 on your keyboard, but the way most people do it is by pressing Command and space. One more thing I'll mention that isn't really navigating macOS, but it's still important, is the difference in installing programs between Windows and macOS. On Windows, you'll probably get an exe file that you just double click and run, and it installs everything, and you've got to make sure you're uninstalling some spyware along with your program. But on Mac, it's a bit different. There are installer files, yes, 100%. They come as a .pkg file. Those are the ones you run and you just let them do its thing. But most apps will come in a .dmg file, and when you open that .dmg file, you'll have the program and a shortcut to your applications folder. In that case, all you need to do to install it is just drag the application into the folder. Oh, and there's also the Mac App Store. Like that, people use that a lot. It is much better than the Windows Store, and I would highly suggest using it, whenever you can. Now, let's talk keyboard shortcuts. While the foundational concept of most keyboard shortcuts remains very, very similar to Windows, the keyboard shortcuts themselves are very different, in some cases. You'll notice that instead of your usual Control, Function, Start, and Alt in the bottom left of your keyboard, you'll have Function, Control, Alt, and Command. On most Macs, the Function key works as the key to switch languages, but most of the time, that basically just means opening the emoji menu. We've already talked about Spotlight, but in case you skipped that section, you can access it by pressing Command and space. Some of the basics that are learned in Windows have been changed, and some have been changed for what seems like no good reason, but you do get used to them pretty quick. Copy and paste is now Command C and V, instead of Control C and V, and cut and paste is now Command X and V, unless you're working in Finder. In that case, you press Command C no matter what you want to do. To paste, you just press Command V. But if you want to paste it as if you just cut the file, you press Command Option V. It does sound pretty bad, but you get used to it on the first day. Screenshotting is also different, but for the better. On Windows, you press Windows key, Shift, and S, and that brings up the Snip and Sketch menu, and take a screenshot, and you get some basic annotation tools, but that's about it. On Mac, you'll press Command Shift 5, which opens up a screenshot menu similar to Snip and Sketch, with the addition of built-in screen recording, which is, why isn't that in Windows? Why? Anyway, even once you've taken your screenshot, you have so much more to work with. There are, of course, just so many tools to edit your screenshot. I can't even describe it, there's so many. And you can even send it off to an iPhone or an iPad to annotate with the touchscreen or even with an Apple Pencil and send it straight back. It's awesome. And if you don't like Command Shift 5, you can change the shortcut for it, which I'll talk more about later in the video. I'm going to quickly blast through some other helpful shortcuts just to get us to the next section. Command Q will fully quit an app like Alt F4. Command Tab is the Mac equivalent of Alt Tab. F3, or the key with the icon of 3 scattered rectangles, brings up Mission Control, which is the equivalent of Start Tab. Command deletes the selected file. The Touch ID button also acts as your power button and your lock button, and if you have an iMac without Touch ID, the Touch ID button is replaced by a standard button with a lock icon. Command H will hide a window without minimizing it, and Command M will minimize a window. You can create more shortcuts or edit existing ones by going into System Preferences, then Keyboard, and Shortcuts. You can also use hot corners, which perform an action when you move your mouse up to the corner of the screen, or like a specific corner. I'll talk more about them later in the video though. To recap, you now know what the dock and menu bar are and how they work, basic keyboard shortcuts like cut, copy, paste, and opening the screenshot utility, and differences between Windows and macOS in everyday use. You've gotten past the hardest part of switching to macOS, so good job. Everything from here is just additional info to make your experience even better. While I would suggest continuing here, to learn even more and to keep my viewer retention up, you can safely exit the video here and know how to use macOS. Okay, for the rest of the stayed, I like you guys better, but it's time for section 2. There are 2 great ways to run Windows apps on macOS, those being Crossover and Parallels. Let's talk about Crossover first. Crossover uses a framework known as Wine, which is a framework to allow Windows apps to run on Mac and Linux. It is really tedious and annoying to set up yourself for even the most basic of programs, and that's where Crossover comes in. It just does it for you. This option doesn't require a large amount of storage taken up by another Windows install, and it can take the most advantage of your system's hardware. However, some programs might not work in Crossover, and that's where Parallels comes in. Parallels takes a completely different strategy. It uses a technique known as virtualization, and just runs an entire install of Windows inside macOS. Most programs won't even realize they're being virtualized. If you don't have an Apple Silicon Mac, which you can check by going to the menu bar at the Apple icon, about this Mac, and if it says, you know, like under chip, if it says Apple M1, then, or like M2, you've got Apple Silicon, but if you don't, whatever. You can also use Boot Camp. This allows you to split your hard drive into 2 separate sections and install Windows on one of those sections. This will have 100% compatibility when running Windows programs, and it's the only way to run games with kernel level anti-cheat, like Genshin Impact and Valorant. Although I'll talk more about gaming later. Unfortunately, the option does require you to restart every time. Unfortunately, Crossover and Parallels both cost money. Fortunately, both have free trials, so you can test your specific programs and see if it works for you. First, I'll teach you how to use Crossover. This assumes that you have Crossover 22, which at the time of recording is in beta. However, the beta is free to join and is pretty easy. You just go to just Google it, you'll find it. You can even, if you do enough beta testing, you can even get things like, you know, stickers and shirts and even a free license of Crossover. Once you've downloaded Crossover, simply click on the install button in the bottom left of the program, then type in the program you want to install. If it's been tested, you'll see a star rating based on how well it runs and any specifics you'll need for the program. For example, Microsoft Office 2010 requires you to provide an installer file. Just click install and follow the instructions and you're good to go. If the app you're trying to install hasn't been added, you can always try giving it an exe or an MSI file and just seeing what happens. If what you need doesn't work through Crossover, that's where Parallels comes in. Once you open Parallels after installation, you'll get a message saying like, you know, M1 Mac, Apple Silicon, and you know, you can just skip that. After you're there, you get a prompt to choose your OS. You can use Linux distros, but we'll just stick with Windows here. The installation is basically completely automated, and once it finishes, you'll be dropped into a bog standard Windows desktop. From there, you can just install your programs as if you were on a Windows desktop, because you are. If you have an Intel Mac and neither of those options work, you can use Boot Camp. I personally haven't used it before. I've heard it's fairly simple to set up, but I don't feel comfortable teaching someone how to do something if I've never done it myself. So I'll leave a link to a Boot Camp tutorial in the video description. Parallels, Crossover, and Boot Camp can all be used for gaming, but I'll talk more about gaming later. macOS is great out of the box, but it can be better. Here are some useful apps to just, you know, spice up your experience. I'm just gonna rapid fire through this, so I'm not gonna look at the camera, I'm just gonna... Is that it? Okay, thanks dude. Rectangle is a free app that brings Windows snapping to macOS. Once installed, you can just drag windows to the edges of your screen to snap them into place. It boggles my mind that this isn't built in. Setapp is a monthly subscription service that's basically Xbox Game Pass but for Mac utilities. A lot of popular paid apps are available through this subscription. If you got excited for me saying that I was thinking I was going to say like this is just Xbox Game Pass but for Mac games, Apple Arcade, just, you know, it's great. Bartender is a paid app that allows you to hide menu bar icons. If you have a MacBook with a notch, this is a must. Hidden Bar does the same thing as Bartender but for free. Unfortunately, it doesn't really work well with MacBooks that have a notch. Top Notch is a free app that adds a black bar to the wallpapers on your system to hide the notch on your MacBook if you aren't particularly fond of it. Cloud Battery is a free app on macOS and iOS that allows you to view the battery of your iOS devices on your Mac and vice versa. Luna is a freemium app that allows you to control the brightness of external displays without hacky workarounds like simply putting a dark overlay across your screen. Stats is a free app that adds stats like your CPU usage and temperature to your menu bar. Moss is a free app that adds smooth scrolling to non-Apple mice. It sounds unnecessary, but you'll soon find that it is very necessary the first time you try to use a mouse that isn't made by Apple. My Wallpaper is a freemium app which brings live animated wallpapers to macOS, similar to Wallpaper Engine. OneSwitch is a paid menu bar utility which brings a bunch of handy options to your menu bar, my personal favorite being the cleaning mode, which makes your screen black and locks your keyboard. Arial is a free app which brings the Apple TV Arial screensavers to macOS, along with some others that are shot by community members. App Cleaner is a free app that fully uninstalls apps without leaving any files behind. I know that was a lot, but I use each and every single one of those apps on a daily basis, and to me, they are essential. Gaming on Mac has come a long way thanks to the power of Apple Silicon, but just because the chip is powerful, that doesn't mean developers are going to support it. And they haven't been. Luckily, there are ways to get Windows games running on Mac, and there is a great variety of Mac ports. To get an idea of what does and doesn't run on Apple Silicon, you can check out the Apple Gaming Wiki M1 Master List. It is a fantastic resource, just full of games and just, you know, it's great. If you want to play any games that isn't Flappy Golf 2 from the App Store on your Mac, it's basically mandatory for anyone who's gaming on Apple Silicon. First, I'll talk about Mac native games. You can find these in the Mac App Store, obviously, but you can also find them in your Steam library fairly easily. Once you download the Mac Steam client, you can just click the Apple logo icon in your library, and it will immediately filter by what games you can run. You probably won't find older games here, even if they do have a Mac version, because starting from macOS, I want to say Mojave. No. Starting with macOS Catalina, Macs couldn't run 32-bit apps, and a lot of older games like, the Half-Life titles haven't been updated for it. Usually, you'll find a lot of indie games here, because, I don't know, they're the only ones talented enough to press export to Mac. Sometimes you'll find that big AAA game, which is like, oh wow, that has a Mac port? No way. You should cross-reference with the Apple Gaming Wiki though, to make sure you're not going to waste time and bandwidth downloading something that isn't going to work, like I did with Stray. 3 times. The App Store isn't something to be overlooked though. There are a great variety of free games available, like Octagon and, Flappy Golf 2. But there's also a great variety of paid games. Plus, there's Apple Arcade, which you can subscribe to for $7.99 a month, which gives you access to over 180 games like LEGO Builder's Journey, Oceanhorn 2, Sayonara Wild Hearts, What the Golf, and more. All ad and in-app purchase free. If the game you want isn't on Mac, you might even want to try game streaming. It's a lot easier to set up than Parallels or Crossover, and it's a lot easier on the battery and hardware on your Mac, and storage. Plus, you don't need to worry about how powerful your Mac is. Your 2019 dual-core MacBook Air sitting in the corner will be able to run Cyberpunk with game streaming. In Australia, the 2 major services that are available at the moment are GeForce Now and Xbox Game Pass. I don't have Xbox Game Pass, and GeForce Now is free. Today I'm going to be showing you how to set up GeForce Now. It kind of differs depending on what country you're in, so I would look up a specific guide depending on where you live. But it seems to just be sign up on the website, download the client, log in on the client, launch a game, wait in the queue if you're not a paid member, and just play. But maybe your internet's or you don't have any cloud gaming services available in your country. That's where Parallels and Crossover come in. Or you might just not want to stream your games. Anyway, if you skipped over section 2A, I would go back, because that's where I demonstrate how to set up and install Crossover and Parallels. Because we've already gone over how to use them, I'm going to go over specifically how to use them for gaming, and it's not really that different to just using them normally. In Crossover, just click install in the bottom left and install Steam. Launch it, log in, and start downloading games. It's that easy. In Parallels, it's the same story. Open up your Windows VM, download Steam, log in, start downloading. Unfortunately, these options do cost money, and there's no real free good alternative. Those are the best ways to game on Mac, but I wouldn't necessarily buy a Mac as my main gaming machine just yet. You can always consult r/Mac Gaming if you need extra help. Oh, one more thing, this is really cool. If you connect a wireless controller and press the equivalent of the Xbox button, like the home button on the Switch Pro controller and the PS button on the DualShock controller, it opens straight into the games folder in your launchpad. And that wraps up section 2. To recap, you learned how to use Crossover and Parallels to run Windows games and apps on macOS, some useful apps to improve your macOS user experience and migrate features that are only on Windows, how to filter your Steam library to show macOS games, and how to use the Apple Gaming Wiki to find out what games run on Apple Silicon and what don't. Now that we've gone through that, I'm going to tell you how I have my Mac set up, so you can get some ideas or even just modify it to work for you. First, my hot corners. In macOS Monterey, none of them are set by default except for the bottom right, which will open a quick note. I don't really use quick notes, so, it's bad. I have the bottom right set to show the desktop just like on Windows, the top right to show the screensaver, and the bottom left to open a quick note because maybe I want to use a quick note. Then keyboard shortcuts. I've kept most of the keyboard shortcuts the same except for the screenshot utility. I've changed it from Command-Shift-5 to Command-Shift-S, as that just feels most similar to Windows to me. I know technically you'd be using Option-Shift-S because Option is where the Windows key would be, and that would be the best for maybe muscle memory, but I don't know, Command just feels more right.
I also have Command and Escape set to launch the Launchpad.
In the dock, I have a few things changed. I changed the minimize animation to the scale effect instead of the genie effect because it's faster. I also have applications minimized straight into their icon instead of to the far right of the dock, because I don't know, I just don't like them minimizing to the far right of the dock. I also have recent apps turned off. I have the documents folder added to the dock, and both documents and downloads are set to show their folder icon, not like a preview of what files are actually in the folder. In battery settings, I have the Mac set not to go to sleep when it's plugged in, because I dock my laptop to a monitor, keyboard and mouse, and I close the lid most of the time when I'm at home, so, you know, it's pretty useful for it to not turn off. I also have a 1TB hard drive set up to automatically do Time Machine backups, which, guys, make backups, please. 1TB hard drives are like really affordable, and Time Machine is basically automatic when you get it. You won't even notice it's running. Like after you set it up, you won't even notice. I've turned off most of the default menu bar items, seeing as most of them can be found in the control center. So I'm recording this in my car because that is where I'm editing this video. But there is one thing I forgot to mention. With Siri, if I click the Siri icon in the menu bar, it gives me a type to Siri. But if I say, it will respond with voice responses and all that. And if I click it, it won't speak. Okay, so now I'm editing in my house because that's where I live. There's another thing I forgot to mention. In the Finder, down the bottom, there's a little path that like shows me the kind of hierarchy of where hierarchy of where I am in my file system. That isn't on by default, and you have to enable that on throw up a screen recording. Along with, I removed the recents tab and made it so it didn't default to that because I don't use recents. I think it is bad. So, you know, yeah, forgot those. Well, that's got to be my longest video yet. I'm gonna go get treated for my newly developed carpal tunnel syndrome. But before I do that, I'm gonna say a few words first. Thanks for sticking around. I hope you learned something. That was the point of the video. And I hope that if you watched because you thought I was entertaining sometimes, I hope I entertained you. I promise, my M2 MacBook Air review is coming soon. I've been testing it really thoroughly and comprehensively in multiple real-world environments. Remember to subscribe for that one. And follow me on Twitter for great tweets like that one. I don't know what it's going to be yet. Hopefully it's good. And with that, I'll see you guys next video.